Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Business 101. And my name is Blyden Lukem. Today is Nigeria's Independence Day, and it's a remarkable day as Nigeria turns 65. We'll be looking at Nigeria's growth since independence on Business 101. Let's begin a conversation this way. Independence Day is an annual public holiday in Nigeria observed on the 1st October to mark the country's independence from the United Kingdom in 1960. It is observed nationwide with official ceremonies and public events. The holiday's origin are linked to Nigeria's constitutional development under British colonial administration. Reforms in the 1940s and 1950s increased African participation in government and contributed to the rise of nationalist movement involving figures such as Nnamdi Azikiwe, Obafemi Awolowo, and Ahmadu Bello. Since independence, the day has remained an important date in Nigeria's civic calendar. The president gives a national address and state government holds parades and cultural events. And now to today's independence. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu had rolled out 12 economic milestones and would be part of the conversation today. We'll do analysis in that regard. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has said that Nigeria has achieved 12 economic milestones under his administration. He disclosed this in his 65th Independence Day nationwide broadcast today, Wednesday, 1st October. Multiple observation is that he noted that economic milestones include the achievement of the 2025 revenue target of 20 trillion naira in August, restoration of fiscal of ways and means advances, of fuel subsidy removal, naira stability, and others. This would be the start of the conversation as my guest joins this afternoon. Dr. Wisdom Enang, an energy expert, joins the conversation this afternoon, looking at Nigeria's economic growth since independence and analyzing the president's speech. And most importantly, we'll also look at the traction regarding Dangote, a refinery, and Pegasus. It will be a conversation. Good afternoon, Dr. Wisdom Enang.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much.
All right, Dr. Wisdom Enang, so good to have you. I'm beginning to think where to begin this conversation. Well, I remember the last Independence Day, as you had you on the show, you gave perspective analysis regarding also the possibilities, especially in the energy sector. But let's start by looking at the 12th economic milestone and our President Bola Ahmed Tinubu spoke about. But before we go into the details of it, let me ask you what you make of Nigeria's growth so far economically. Since independence has been 65 years, what has been the remarkable growth for Nigeria so far for you?
Thank you very much. I think I would like to say that in 65 years, we have made some laudable achievements. But that being the case, I also have to say that there have been some missed opportunities. One way to look at this is to ask ourselves which nations were independent right about the time when Nigeria went independent, and what have they done? And what have they achieved? One of the plausible examples would be South Korea. We look at their achievements and we say, look, we could have done more. Most importantly, because South Korea has prided itself as a nation that doesn't have oil, but has built tremendous wealth on the refining sector. And that goes on to highlight that Nigeria has only harnessed 15% of its petroleum value chain, which is what we have in the exploration and production sectors. In the midstream sector, where we have the pipelines, the downstream sectors, and the gas subsectors, we haven't done much. Even in creating economic linkages into the other secondary and tertiary sectors, we haven't done very well. So it's a good time to offer some sober reflections and take ownership of the country. It's not just an affair of the government. It's a combination of all we do as a people that will commingle into the phenomenon called Nigerian success. So I think we need to really look at it from that angle.
All right, a good perspective, Dr. Wisdom Enang there, talking about especially the oil sector, what we've been able to achieve comparatively to the likes of South Korea, that also gained that independence relatively with Nigeria. Well, let's dive into it, because no matter how I want to talk about the changes and that comes with a country, it would center around the man pivoting the country, talking about President Bola Ahmed Tinubu on the speech this morning. First on it is that He said Nigeria attained a record-breaking increase in non-oil revenue, achieving the 2025 target by August with over 20 trillion naira, and in September 2025 alone, Nigeria raised 3.65 trillion naira, and that is 411% higher than the amount raised in May 2023. Well, you've mentioned the oil sector. Let's look at the non-oil sector. The performance has really talked about the growth in that sector. For you, what has been the growth in the non-oil sector?
Well, there's been a lot of growth on a naira basis, especially with the services sector, right? That has given us a very huge amount of growth. But the issue that I'm having is that when you benchmark your growth on a naira basis, it's a very steep growth. When you, if you then benchmark it across the dollar, you may not have that much of a growth. If you even compare the GDP size compared to when about maybe 8 years ago, we may not have, we even have a smaller size. So I accept that there are some more activities from the services sector. Definitely, Nigeria has taken ownership of that, and thanks to the aspect of the local content, which also allowed a lot of activities from a service standpoint to be domiciled in Nigeria, enabling entrepreneurs to build capacity within the service sector for the oil and gas, and even cross-pollinating to service sector for other areas of the economy. So much of our pride comes from that sector, but it leaves us with a lot to do. We need to stimulate growth. There are some of the regulatory levers that has, shown the indication that we may be able to achieve that. So one of it is the Nigeria First policy. But we need to operationalize this. We need to start from government. Every procurement of government needs to have a certain quota, and we need to walk the talk. By now, we need to be aggregating Nigerian producers and making sure we have given a minimum quantity of order for some of our supplies for the entire year, so that they even have this money or this order as a bankable basis to expand production. These are things that we need to do. So we have the levers, but it's just to operationalize it and expand. But I do agree there was some expansion, but I'm saying that the expansion is valid in Naira. If you then kind of put it into a common denominator, which is the dollar basis, then you don't have that much of an exciting growth. And that shows that there's still a lot to do.
From Mr. Wisdom and now that you've talked about naira basis and looking at the dollar basis, one key aspect that really caused trouble even at national level, and talking about the different House of Representatives and Senate, and it's been a conversation in recent times, has to do with Nigeria's debt. But on the President's speech this morning, we also heard that Nigeria's debt service to a revenue ratio has been significantly reduced from 97% to below 50%, especially ways and means advances that threaten its economic stability and trigger inflation in the country. Over the years, we've seen the changes, especially following the removal of corrupt petroleum subsidy, according to the President, and the country being freeing up trillions of naira for targeted investment in the real economy and social programs for the most vulnerable, as well as other tiers of government. Let's talk about the debt situation of the country, how Nigeria has improved in terms of amassing that. When you talk about exchange rate also, it plays a factor, because the early 70s, you could see the difference in the exchange rate, and not significant between the naira and the dollar and the pound, but right now it's significant amid increased debt.
Very much. I think one thing we need to realize is we have made some real advances, but I have to also say a lot of these data has had to do with a change in the framework of how we define our economy. And so it's based on, some of the appreciation is based on statistical rebasing. I think that's the best word I'm going to use for that. The reason is this: there's growth, but some of the details you're reporting take into cognizance the fact that we have recently rebased our economy, and two things come out of that rebasing. The rebasing meant that we were able to see a much better economic growth, lower inflation, but more importantly, we're able to capture other sectors that were maybe perhaps non-formal, and those non-formal economies that were not